Okay, I've just been told we are live. So welcome everyone to the February 13th Asheville City Council meeting. If you could just take a moment and silence your cell phones. If you want to sign up to speak under an item, you can do so out in the hall, and Jerry will sign you up to speak and it will populate on our screen here before us. So if we could begin, as we begin all meetings, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have two proclamations tonight. The first is Black History and Legacy Month. And I've got Alexandria Ravenel and Anthony Thomas, if you want to meet me, and with whoever else would like to join you up at the front there. Okay, all right, here we go. Whereas the month of February is nationally designated as Black History Month, and whereas Black History Month is a time of acknowledgement and celebration for all Americans, to honor and recognize those who have advanced the causes of civil rights, human rights, strengthened our nation, our communities, our families, and who were instrumental in building a legacy of excellence for which we are inspired, along with building a nation of freedom and equality for all people. And whereas in Black History Month, we as citizens, community, and a nation acknowledge the historically painful past of chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and the atrocities taken against African Americans, the lives lost, the harm committed, and the present-day ramifications that are still impacting our African American communities, for which we as a city are committed to addressing through our reparations efforts, policies, practices, and visioning to make Asheville a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. And whereas during Black History Month, all Americans are encouraged to reflect on and to honor the journey of African Americans, the rich ancestral heritage, the resilience, the sacrifices, the courage, and the enduring legacy of invaluable contributions, including but not limited to medicine, science, architecture, education, government, engineering, the arts, leadership, and social justice, including our local heroes and heroines of Asheville. And whereas in acknowledging African Americans and celebrating Black History Month, we do so collectively as citizens, as a community, and a country with appreciation and gratitude for the remarkable strength, commitment, and resolve of the human spirit of African Americans to yearn for, create, and experience one of the greatest freedoms allotted to all persons of the human race, the autonomy of being recognized, valued, and dignified as a human being. For all persons are created equally. And whereas in honoring the immeasurable benefaction of African Americans locally, in our society and the globe, all Americans are encouraged to reflect on the past successes and challenges of African Americans, be inspired by these achievements, such that every citizen continues to improve our society so that we live up to and embody the ideals and virtues of freedom, equality, and justice for all people of the human race. And now, therefore, I, Esther Manhammer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim February 2024 as Black History and Legacy Month in Asheville, and encourage all citizens in Asheville to recognize the importance of Black History and Legacy Month in our lives and heritage.
Good evening to everyone, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, council members, city manager. Just want to say, my name is Marcus Kirkman. I am with the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Just wanted to take the time to say thank you for these two incredible human beings. And our city of Asheville, we are very fortunate to have them. We don't always have the blueprint to do the work that we want to do in life. If we're fortunate enough to look back, we may have seen it done before. but specifically with the YMI. We know the rich history and what it means to our community, but we got to a point we didn't know what it would look like going forward. But your resilience and your commitment and your vision is seeing it through. And we just want to say thank you. So thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity.
This will seem like a topic switch, but we have one other proclamation, and that is National Invasive Species Awareness Week. And so if we have Raven Sterling and anyone else with you to come. Thank you. Okay, I'll leave this in there. Whereas invasive aquatic, riparian, and terrestrial species influence the productivity, value, and management of a broad range of land and water resources in Western North Carolina. And whereas the cost to prevent, monitor, and control invasive species combined with the cost to crop damage, fisheries, forests, and other resources cost the U.S. $120 billion annually. And whereas after habitat destruction, invasive species are the second greatest threat to biodiversity. And whereas invasive species threaten the survival of native plants and animals and interfere with ecosystem functions by changing processes such as fire, nutrient flow, and flooding. Whereas invasive species are a significant threat to almost half of all native species currently listed as federally endangered. And whereas invasive species impair infrastructure and impede transportation, water delivery systems, and energy production. And whereas invasive species impede industry, threaten agriculture, obstruct outdoor recreation, endanger human health, and are becoming increasingly harder to control as a result of rapid global commercialization and human travel. Now therefore I, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim the week of February 26th through March 3rd, 2024 as National Invasive Species Awareness Week in Asheville, and hereby encourage residents to participate in local projects to mitigate invasive species, as well as promote knowledge and understanding of the threats they pose.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, for recognizing National Invasive Species Awareness Week for the second year in a row. I'm Raven Sterling with Raven Invasive Plant Management. I'm joined by LB with Kudzu Culture. There are many organizations throughout Western North Carolina that focus on invasive species, and we hope that the City of Asheville will continue this focus and support community projects to eradicate invasives. Over the past year, we've worked at Reed Creek Greenway as well as the George Washington Carver Edible Garden. This, if people don't know, is the oldest publicly accessible edible garden in the United States, and it is under attack. It's actually a really sad state over there with invasive plants that destroy the soil, kill other plants, and outcompete the food that they're trying to grow there. So we hope that we will have your support going forward and that the citizens of Asheville will take an opportunity during this week to learn more about invasives and hopefully go out and work on a project. So thank you again.
Thank you. You can take the proclamation.
And thank you all so much for paying attention to these issues. I'd also like to thank Bountiful Cities and the City of Asheville for ongoing programming. We just did a kudzu root starch, how to make kudzu root starch workshop last weekend at Stevens Lee Rec Center in partnership with and I'm from Kudzu Culture. I'm the director of nonprofit Kudzu Culture. So with that support, we were able to teach people how to make this amazing kudzu root starch that's used in macrobiotic cooking and also medicinal and herbal products. There's actually a kudzu trade deficit in the United States where kudzu biomass is imported, but very little of it is sourced regionally. So we have a great opportunity. And through the neighborhood grant with Reed Creek and through the support with Bountiful Cities, we're able to do some great workshops. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Apparently our kudzu goats aren't cutting it. Council, we have next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have questions, comments, or a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Why should I comment on item E? So for a lot of folks in the audience who may not know the term LUIGE, we're talking about the Land Use Incentive Grant. When I started showing up to public meetings in 2015, when acronyms like LUIGE would get thrown around, that was like a barrier to my understanding what it even meant. A land use incentive grant is a tool that the city uses for partnerships for affordable housing where we grant part of tax dollars back to developers that are building housing. And it works effectively like rent control. It's a tool that I want to be able to use, but it's not getting us the outcomes that we need for equitable affordable housing. So we're looking at who is lacking access based on disparities around race and gender. And if it's not for all of us, if it's not going to help us meet our goals, then we're using the tool ineffectively. So I'm really excited that we're pausing it so we can look at it to get to our goals. And I hope that we get back to using it quickly and effectively very soon.
Just to add on that, I request that we pull it so that we can have alternate language that came out of our committee today about the time range of when this would be on pause. Or I could read it right now and,
Yeah.
great, so I will read it right now for consideration. So the alternate resolution on item E is the Asheville City Council hereby approves a pause in the land use incentive program until at least the end of June 2024 or until all advisory bodies have completed their review of recommendations to be prepared by staff, whereby no applications will be accepted until City Council approves a new policy or confirms the existing policy. And so the intent behind that was just to have a sunset date so that it doesn't indefinitely get in a churn if we're having trouble bringing it back.
Can you reread that? Because when I hear at least June, I don't hear sunset.
It's not exactly a sunset, it's more with conditions, because we got to run it through all these bodies before it can come back.
So you want to hear it again?
Because when you said sunset and then I heard at least,
Yeah, it's-
in my
Yeah.
mind I went, that's not a sunset.
Right.
Yeah. I guess the intent was more of a sunset, but that's not what's written here.
Because you can't, I mean, I think the discussion we had in the committee today was like, let's not wait forever for this to come back. Let's try to put some certainty around when it's coming back. And so there was a timeline presented in the committee about the plan to bring it back to us and all the different folks that needed to review it. So we just wanted to incorporate that.
Yeah.
And the end of that timeline was in May, or?
Yeah, it's pretty soon. So this wouldn't effectively put it back in place without our vote to do so.
Yeah.
So why did you choose at least June?
It's not, okay.
I may
Sorry,
be able to,
I
I may be able to speak to that. So in the staff report, the city staff have detailed what they believe to be the path for advisory body review for this. And there are, as the mayor mentioned, several different bodies that would need to take a look at this. Given the upcoming predicted schedules of those, it looks like that would be completed around June, and the goal then would be to allow that to come to city council immediately thereafter. So the proposed wording is really a either or. It's that it would sunset either at the end of June or until these bodies, whether earlier or later, have had their chance to go through the review process, because we don't know exactly how long that will take.
Yeah, so it does make me think that instead of the language being approves a pause until at least, it's approves a pause until June or until advisory boards.
Well, I actually have a different question then, and thank you for your leadership on this, Antoinette, and on getting us to equitable, affordable housing. I'm not inclined to pass it being used again until it's right. So is June enough time, or are we really setting the goal of equity?
And again, so calling this a sunset is not correct. It's not going to just go back into place without us taking action. So you'll be able to determine if it's satisfied the requirements that you will need before you're going to vote to put it back in place.
Meaning it's gonna have
It's
to
not
reach approval from
Yeah,
each
from
one of
us.
these
It's not going to be able to be
committees before.
automatically reinstated without our action. I think we're just trying to publicly commit to a timeline
Yeah.
that is not, there's nothing to enforce it.
Well, take the timeline out of the motion and just just say that once it clears committee, then we have an approval?
That's where it was originally.
That's the original
Okay.
one.
So
I just am
it
trying to
would
make
be
sure that sometimes things can get, I mean, we all are part of a bureaucracy. Sometimes things can just get clogged for a long time, and I think this is a meaningful tool. So I was just trying to assert that we want to not get caught in churn and years later be like, what was that tool, Luigi? It was so great. Just want to make sure that we're bringing it back.
Yeah, so can we just, I think that's noted.
Yeah, okay. Here's a different one. What do you think about this one? Approves a pause. It is expected that council will consider a new policy in June 2024. So that makes me feel comfortable, just like we're staying on track.
Yeah, and it really says nothing, too, but, okay.
Yeah.
It is expected that we might look at, but, sure, I can go for that.
Great.
Sage, did you want to speak? So I should have mentioned, we have one Councilmember Sage Turner attending by phone, so let's see how this goes. Sage, did you want to comment on this item?
I'd just like to add something real quick. For context, when we are granting these Luigi grants, they are usually in relationship to a very large complex of, over 100 units, so it has to go through a large review. So when we met in HCD yesterday, I just want to reiterate something I shared, which is this is in no way, in my opinion, a step back from our commitment to affordable housing policy and growth in units. But because we don't have anyone in the queue, and because a Luigi grant must be granted before a conditional zoning is granted, then we actually are not impacting any potential projects right now. So it's a perfect time to just take a pause, let the Affordable Housing Plan Advisory Group and Enterprise come together and review and just wrap it up into one document, one set of policies that can come back together. That's what I kind of understood the goal for the staff as well. So I just wanted to share my support in that perspective.
Okay.
Mayor, for the record, the motion that's on the table is as written in the staff report.
There's
Okay.
a motion on the table for the,
So you made a motion to approve the consent agenda, Maggie. What?
We don't.
I heard
Wait, I
two
need to go
separate
back to the
motions.
staff report, because did you do?
This was just a suggested amendment, which has been withdrawn, and we
Okay.
returned to the original language, so we still need a motion.
okay. So then the motion is for,
Is
I
to
move
approve.
to approve the consent agenda.
Yeah.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
okay, great.
Okay, and so who officially seconded that? Do you know? Maggie?
Nobody.
You don't have
No,
one yet.
no one, okay. Oh, Janika has, thank you. All right, okay. No one has signed up to speak under this item, so all those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, I just checked it. Did it change? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so for public comment for tonight, you'll have 3 minutes, except for at the end, everyone has 2 minutes, to speak, and you'll step up to the lectern and watch the lights. Green means go, orange means you're getting close to the end, and red means stop. So during our meeting, we don't allow noise making, clapping, snapping, etc. But if you really feel compelled to let us know how you feel about the comments or whatever, you can kind of give us a wave. And if you really don't like it, you can kind of indicate that is helpful for us in the flow and abides by the rules of our group. So I know you're some first timers. You can do it. It's fun. All right. So Elise Matter is signed up to speak. Okay, the name is changing. It's Elise Martyr.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Elise Martyr. I just have a few brief comments on the pause of Luigi applications. This policy is very well intentioned, but it needs some reevaluation and refinement to really encourage projects that have greater benefits for our community. The program, as it typically stands, typically generates housing at the 80% AMI level, and a recent report detailed how affordable housing projects targeting 80% AMI actually exacerbate racial and gender disparities. With the current policy, a development in the central business district offering only minimal affordability, that being 20% of units available at 80% AMI. This type of development, being in the central business district, would automatically qualify for 6 years of tax grants out of 20 maximum. More, the program is not doing enough to encourage development along transit corridors outside of the central business district. Please halt these applications until the policy has been revised. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have adopted the consent agenda. All right, we have, under presentations and reports, I'm going to turn it over to the manager for the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and good evening, everyone. Today, for the manager's report, we have some employee recognitions for outstanding work done by the Asheville Fire Department. And as you all know, normally I like to do these types of employee recognitions myself. But I am going to, for this evening, turn it over to our newly hired fire chief, Michael Case, to provide the presentation. Chief Case has been with us for 6 weeks now, and this provides him with an opportunity to not only formally present to the full council, because he has done it at a committee meeting, but also for our community to meet Chief Case. As I said, I normally like to do these things, and one of our firefighters is really nervous, and so we're going to get on so we can relieve him of some pain. So, Chief Case, would you please come up?
So you've been with us once before in chamber, but this is officially your debut. So welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. And Maggie, that's about to buzz on him. Thank you.
Thanks.
I saw the orange. You guys were telling me something.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I told Ms. Campbell that I was nervous last time I was up here, and so she said, "Well, guess what? You get to do it again." So, thank you for listening. And there's two things we want to talk about tonight that I'm very proud of, even as a new employee here with the City of Asheville, because I recognize the greatness in what it is. One of them was a very close call that we had at the end of last month in January on the 25th, where we had one of our firefighters fall through a floor into a basement that was on fire. It was a pretty serious event, and we were very fortunate that the training of the command staff, the firefighters, and everybody else that was involved in that scene were able to get him out of there fairly quickly. And he suffered some burns, went to the hospital for didn't stay the night, and was released later on. And my understanding is he's coming back to work now. So what could have been a very tragic event ended up being a successful rescue of that firefighter out of that basement. The building suffered significant damage to it, and he was able to extricate with the help of his other firefighters. I think when I looked at this incident, I listened to it at home that night. It was the first serious fire that I'd listened to since I'd been here. Every employee of the Asheville Fire Department was extremely calm. They recognized the emergency right away, and the rescue efforts went down very quickly. What's interesting is the techniques, the tactics, the skill set that they used to rescue this firefighter came as a direct result of the tragic death of Captain Bowen in 2011. I've been through at least 4 line-of-duty deaths in my career, and it affects not only the fire department and the firefighters, it affects the entire community. And I'm sure those of you that were here remember that event, but what's important here is to understand that the reports and the studies and everything that came out of that tragic death back then led to recommendations that these firefighters on January 25th put into play. And so the way the command staff stayed together, the way the rescue teams came in and extricated this firefighter from this was a direct result of the information that was put into the after-action report from the tragic death of Captain Bowen. So I try to tell our firefighters there's a reason why we do what we do. There's a reason why that we, you know, these days may seem long when you're doing all this training, but this was an exact example of the things that this community went through, and the responses and the trainings and the efforts and things that we put in place back in 2011 because of this. So we're very fortunate that this didn't turn out differently, and it's a direct result of that previous call. So these things I was very proud of these men. So, yeah. Secondly, I want to make sure we talk about Asheville Fire Department's hazardous materials team. So in my previous career, I was in charge of a state typed, meaning the state of Ohio looked at this team and said it met certain standards. Asheville Fire has one of those teams here, and recently we recognized how good of a team we have here in Asheville. There's only a few of these type teams in the entire state. The three people behind me, who I'll introduce in a moment, are members and directly a part of why this team is as good as it is. And they recently competed in a competition of all the hazmat teams in the state of North Carolina, and they were rated as the #1 hazardous materials response team in the entire state. That's a really, really impressive feat. But it didn't end there. The state of North Carolina sent them to Florida, a group of them to Florida, where they competed again at a national level competition, and they were awarded as the #1 in the hazardous materials trivia competition as part of that. So I want to introduce these three individuals right here. We have Lieutenant Hessen right here. If you can stand up, you're nervous. Stand up, please. Firefighter White right next to him here. And sitting in the corner over here is Miss Abby Moore. Please stand up, Abby. Abby is the reason why we have such a great team here. She's responsible for all the stuff that happens behind the scenes to get this team their equipment, their supplies, get them the funding that they need in order to be the level of a team that they are. So I'm very, very proud of this group, and I want to make sure that they're recognized. So thank you.
And can you show your award?
Oh, yes. Yes, he has an award.
Is it a belt? No.
There you go.
Very nice.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, we thought in recognition of the proclamation that you just gave out about Black History Month and Legacy Month, we thought that we would provide you all in the community just an idea of the events. Can you do the next? That the City of Asheville, mostly through our Parks and Recreation Department, will have underway for this month. We did have an event on February the 10th. It's Shiloh's Storytelling and Reflection at Linwood Shiloh Community Center. This coming Friday, we have a number of events that are being housed and sponsored out of a number of our community centers throughout the community. February 16th, Edible Park Work and Learn Day at Dr. George Washington Carver Edible Park. February 16th, 6 to 7:30 p.m., Stumptown Story Night and Dinner at Tempe Avery. And then February the 16th again from 6 to 7:30, Burton Street History at Burton Street Community Center. And then also, lastly, on February the 16th from 6 to 8, Black History Through the Eyes of Art opening reception at Dr. Wesley Grant Center, Senior Southside Community Center. And then on February the 21st, from 1 to 2, Past, Present, and Future of Black History at our Harvest House Community Center. And then on February the 22nd, Soul Food Supper at Stevens Lee Community Center from 6 to 8 p.m. All of these events are free of charge, and so we encourage all that can participate, please do. Thank you, Mayor. That concludes our presentation.
And we've heard some great news tonight, and I really want to commend Parks and Rec for their programming. It's just been dramatically increasing, it seems to me, over the last couple of years under D. Tyrell McGirt, and a pretty amazing expansion of what a Parks and Rec department does in the city.
So. Thank you very much. That is it for
Okay,
us.
that concludes the manager's report. We're going to move to the public hearings agenda. So the first item on our public hearings agenda is a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 492 Sardis Road from Commercial Industrial District to Commercial Expansion / Conditional Zone. And Clay Mitchell is back again to present to us another zoning item. I'm trying to tee it up, but it's a little excitement.
Pardon me?
Just a little excitement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening, and welcome again to another conditional zoning application. My name is Clay Mitchell. I'm an urban planner in the Planning and Urban Design Department, mayor, councilors. This is a property at 492 Sardis Road. It is currently zoned commercial industrial. The red dashed line shows the boundary of the city of Asheville. To kind of the northwest is county land. The zoning in that area for the county is public service and employment centers, and in the area of the city of Asheville is surrounded entirely by commercial industrial. Because of the size of the building, being over 100,000 square feet, our UDO requires this to be a conditional zoning application. So this will become a commercial expansion conditional zone for that property. The future land use designation is industrial manufacturing. Staff does not believe that a change in the future land use is needed for this particular use. The site plan is fairly straightforward. It's a single building. All of the storage units are internal, climate controlled. There's a compliant amount of parking on the site, bike parking. The only technical modification for this is the sidewalk configuration. The commercial expansion district requires 10-foot sidewalks and 8-foot internal to the site. Along Sardis Road and Sand Hill Road, the applicant is proposing a 5-foot wide sidewalk with a planting strip to accommodate the street trees. And it also brings the sidewalk off the edge of the pavement. It's a fairly fast traveled road. And actually having that buffer is actually better for the pedestrian environment. And it also meets the configuration of other pedestrian infrastructure out there, both in the county land and in areas of the city that have already been developed. For landscaping and open space, all are compliant. No relaxation or waivers or alternative compliance are needed. The only thing you don't see on this plan is along the western border is where the tree canopy protection area will be located with a significant amount of new planting on the property. The property is currently open and undeveloped. These are the elevations of the building. If you recall, the property is kind of triangular and has a curved frontage. So the top two elevations are kind of from those two different viewpoints. And then the rear sides of the building are shown on the lower two frontages. The applicant has been asked by me to investigate renewable energy sources as an option of their development, consistent with our discussions in the past. They also propose to make a good faith effort to contract with small minority firms as part of their work. And again, the only technical modification relates to the sidewalk. With us tonight is a couple of representatives of the design team from FEI, Tyler Wagner and Brent Cockram. Also from BSafe, whose headquarters is in Greensboro, and I believe we're founded there. Officials from the company, Al Leonard, Ken Chavez, and Lance Appleberg, and the property owners are here as well. The comprehensive plan goals that we feel this meets, we feel it's consistent with the future land use map, industrial manufacturing, supports a number of goals relating to facilitating development that maximizes public benefit by putting these uses in commercial industrial zone. They're outside of the high central kind of business locations, and by offering those pedestrian facilities, we see a more connected and comfortable walking area. Even though it's in the commercial industrial zone, there are two schools in that location. One is the Franklin School of Innovation, and then the county land also has the Inca Intermediate School. So it's building up a pedestrian area out there. Hopefully that will mean something for folks that are in the area, and it provides that kind of connection that we can see. It's most consistent with the council's goal of a well-planned and livable community, and this has been through technical review committee in November, where it was approved. Planning and Zoning Commission approved it in January 5-0. And consistent with that, we concur with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommend approval of the petition for this conditional zoning. I'm made it as exciting as I could.
There you go.
You may be surprised that I actually have a question about this. So I talked to some of my students and their families who live in the close neighborhood, and I was like, what are the things your neighborhood doesn't have that it needs? And they're like, well, we have a grocery store, and we have schools, and we have jobs, and we don't have trees. Are there any requirements for canopy and this kind of development, and is the applicant meeting those needs?
Yes, so this is we have multiple landscaping and tree requirements. They're related to property buffers, and property buffers are only triggered when they abut inconsistent zones, primarily residential zones, of which none of those zones are adjacent to this property. But what you see is vehicle use area landscaping as well as building impact landscaping. That's the red and the blue. And then, like I said, it would be another complete sheet, which I didn't want to clutter the presentation, shows that they're meeting the full tree canopy protection area along that white area along the western edge of the property. That plan will be recorded. They will be required to keep those trees in perpetuity.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up because when the community sees that, we are indeed meeting the requirements, and so as the applicant, it will be seen as a win.
Yes, every single one of those trees, every plant that you see up there is going to be newly planted.
Thank you.
Any other parts to the?
Pardon me?
Go ahead. Or is there more?
I'm just waiting for your question.
That's it. That was it.
Oh, okay.
Imagine that.
That's it.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Let's see. We don't have anyone who wants to comment on this item, so I'm going to open the public hearing and close the public hearing, and then, council, do I have a motion?
Okay, I'll make it. I move to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 492 Sardis Road, commercial, industrial to commercial expansion, conditional zone, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request, 1, provides development that maximizes real estate development to meet the needs of the residential and commercial community, and 2, makes streets more walkable and connected, especially where sidewalks are located at street crossings and where connectivity eliminates gaps proximate to greenways.
Sandra, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing item A is done with. Thank you. So for B and C, we have, as you know, this is an application made outside the city for an ordinance change to cottage development standards and to flag lot standards. The applicant has requested that we move these two items to the February 27th meeting. However, I was able to talk to staff about when they would be ready to move ahead with some of the other pieces of the missing middle housing study, specifically the recommendations around displacement, because of what I'm hearing from council is that we want to be able to consider displacement recommendations either at the same time or before we consider ordinance amendments or other considerations around implementing the missing middle housing study. So Steph Munsendall's not here, but what she said is that the displacement recommendations are going to come in two pieces, and the first piece will come to PED and then P&Z and then City Council, and it will arrive at City Council in April. Maggie Burleson, remind me when in April 23. So, the recommendation in consultation with staff would be to move these two items to April 23rd, so that you all would have a chance to consider the displacement recommendations, at least in partnership with this first part of the missing middle housing study, rather than the February 27th recommendation.
And Mayor, Ms. Dahl is here if you have any additional questions of her.
See you in the back.
So do we need a motion to?
Yes, we
do
need
that?
a
Great.
motion for item B to move to the date.
Can I do it for B and C, or should I just repeat it?
I think we got to do them separate.
Great, okay, so I make a motion to postpone public hearing B until April 22nd.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
23rd.
23rd. Yeah.
Golly, y'all.
I figured you were right since Maggie didn't
Nope,
object.
nope, sorry, gang. So the 23rd.
We know what you meant. Okay. do-
And then
yeah.
for item C, I make a motion that we move public hearing to consider the amendment to the UDO to revise flag lot standards to April 23rd.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will take up those two items on April 23rd. Hopefully we'll be ready by then. Thank you, Barry. We see you. You're here. Okay. All right, moving to unfinished business. Jade, we wanted to draw out this item because it was one of the more exciting things we've been able to consider in a while.
My new favorite topic. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jay Dundas, Capital Projects Director. As a reminder today, I'm here to present on the downtown restroom item. In front of Council are one staff report with two resolutions recommending action on two contracts. One with B. Allen Construction for the site prep and installation of a prefabricated restroom outside the Rankin Avenue garage. And then also a resolution authorizing the purchase of a prefabricated single restroom unit from Madden Fabrication. I'm going to go through the presentation that I unfortunately forgot to change the title on. This was the same presentation that I presented at the agenda briefing last Thursday. But I will go through this briefly to explain the information that we collected by the request of council at the January 23rd regular meeting. Key takeaways for this project are the downtown restroom project helps to address downtown cleanliness and safety challenges by providing additional 24/7 downtown restroom access. $650,000 in ARPA funding was approved for the downtown restroom project in spring of 2022. The location of the restroom is in proximity to high traffic areas and replaces the portable restroom that has been in the Pocket Park at the corner of Rankin and College since 2020. The improvements to the Pocket Park and the durability of the prefabricated restroom unit will create a more secure environment and lessen restroom downtime. And staff have analyzed the upfront and long-term costs of installing and maintaining the prefabricated restroom unit compared to the opening and maintaining of traditional restroom facilities. While the upfront costs are higher for the prefabricated restroom unit, the long-term operating costs are lower. That'll be highlighted in more detail in the presentation. And the addition of the prefabricated unit does not preclude the reopening of restrooms or the installation of other freestanding restrooms. The background, again, I'd mentioned the resolutions that we're hoping to have council act upon tonight. And then also the contract was considered in January on 23rd, 2024, and council asked staff to go out and collect information about partnerships to provide additional restroom availability, and then provide a cost analysis that focused on opening 29 Haywood Street. We did reach out to downtown shelters and care partners, as they were specifically mentioned in the previous meeting. They do have restrooms, but they are really at capacity with the services that they provide. They are certainly doing a great benefit to the downtown, but didn't feel like they really had capacity in their facilities to open these up to the general public. It's very important for them to have adequate sanitation for the people who are seeking care at their facilities. We also have had conversations with Asheville Downtown Association. They are located, co-located with city staff at 29 Haywood, different offices. The open discussion about the idea of reopening the facilities, indoor facilities at 29 Haywood. The items that we will need to evaluate and agree on terms would be the hours of operation, the cleaning and stocking responsibilities, mechanical maintenance, and then the financial or any contractual terms associated with providing assistance with that facility being open. Agreement will likely be limited to daytime, weekday hours, because that's when staff is present, and then additional costs associated with the 24/7 operation, which I'll get into with the analysis. I've mentioned that the Rankin College site is in close proximity to high traffic areas downtown. This is just an analysis of using Google Maps and the Buncombe County GIS program to evaluate how close 29 Haywood and Rankin Street are to these facilities. We've also included, again, the care facilities, the shelters that were mentioned in the last meeting, and they are a little bit more remote from those high traffic areas.
Jade,
Yes, ma'am.
sorry. The previous slide when you were discussing the Downtown Association, in those discussions, did they express a preference for whether they would prefer, if they could only have one open, whether they would prefer to have the Haywood Street
I don't think
restrooms open or the Portland Loo? Did y'all have those?
I didn't have that. Yeah, I'm not aware that they would have a preference one over the other.
Okay, thank you.
These are the conditions. There was some concern or question about the condition of and the operability of the Haywood Street restrooms. They are in fact operable. They do not have the water on right now, but all the fixtures are in place. Turning the water on would make them functional. Okay, so this is the breakdown of the costs associated with opening 29 Haywood Street. Again, that was the only site analyzed because we do own that site, and the time limitations associated with pulling this information together. The scenarios 1 and 3 in this situation would assume that the presence in that building would not require extra security staff during the daytime. Scenarios 2 and 4 would not only add security at night for the 24/7 operation, but also would assume that there would be additional daytime security. So essentially, to walk through this, as indicated in the key takeaways, the opening cost of a Portland Loo, there is a high capital cost associated with this, $482,000. These startup costs reflect the 2 contracts for Portland Loo and for B. Allen Construction. Those costs also include additional security cameras and then relighting the park and then also landscaping within the park. To walk through the cost of opening 29 Haywood, you see additional security cameras in every scenario there for monitoring the activity in the hallway. And then monitoring the security, as I'd already mentioned, the 83.0 represents no need, daytime hours and weekdays, no need for additional security. $83,000 is the cost using the numbers that have recently come out of the parking garage security contract, and then I just extrapolated those over a 24/7 operation, so that's $189,000 if we were to have one additional security guard 24/7. Routine cleaning and maintenance is essentially the same for all scenarios for the 24/7 operation. Vandalism repair is different. You see that we experience vandalism in restrooms quite regularly. It's not unusual for the cost to get into the thousands of dollars very quickly. Portland Loos are designed, they're designed to be very durable, but I did put a few dollars in there, or a couple $1,000s in there, just because there's an expectation that they could be vandalized, but it would be an expected lower cost. Bottom line is that if you were looking at 24/7 operations, worst case scenario for 29 Haywood would be about $233,000 in the first year, and the Portland Loo would be about $504,604 the first year of operation. So expanding that over a 5-year use case, you see that the startup the initial costs for scenarios 3 and 4, 24/7 operation in 29 Haywood are lower. But as you progress through with the additional security, those costs remain high. And the additional, because the Rankin College site is associated with the garage there, they do have security on site. It is going to be part of their routine to do outside checks, and that could be part of their routine. And so overall, in a 5-year time frame, the cost of 29 Haywood Street are higher than that of the Portland Loop.
You said a lot higher, we're talking almost double.
Yes, in the 24/7 additional security, it's almost double.
Thank you.
So I was wondering, do we have these numbers? It's as if we're being asked to choose one over the other, but at the beginning you said we weren't. So do we have any plans to open Haywood?
It's a great question. I appreciate you asking it. Is because it does not preclude us from evaluating other sites and opening. We, the idea of potentially continuing the conversation with Asheville Downtown Association and working on those daytime weekday hours could be a good starting point.
So does that mean we don't have plans, but we're looking to determine if we want to have plans?
With them about that. Yeah.
Is that
Correct,
okay.
especially for not the 24/7 operation.
No, initially, the expectation is that it would just be.
So
daytime.
then, are we saying the proper analysis isn't so much whether one is less expensive, it's the cost for both?
I think it's
Ultimately, it would be, that we would be looking at, it really is just, if we open 2 facilities 24/7, the overall cost will be a combination of the scenario 4 and the Portland Loop, so that would be close to $2 million.
yeah.
And then other considerations, up to this point in time, by not approving this, we will have spent about $81,000 in staff costs and design services. Other discretionary costs, which staff would recommend for the park, would be additional security cameras of a one-time cost of $15,000. Landscaping and irrigation, the park is definitely in need of a refresh, so that's about $25,000. And then the portable toilet could be an option there. They are not a great option, but that's about $15,000 a year.
And it's also not an ADA accessible option, because we currently have that right now.
Yeah, that is true. I did do some research on the ADA accessible restrooms there, and it's my understanding that for some reason, they are more subject to vandalism than the smaller units. And the contractor that we have right now they've run out of their inventory of accessible units right now.
Thank you for looking.
Yeah. Key takeaways, I won't read through these again. I'm happy to explain or talk about any of these, but, and then suggested motion is, this is on the staff report, so it's definitely, so this exact language would be on the staff report. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
I actually have 4 areas of concern, and I may have questions.
So do you want Jay to sit down?
Sure.
Okay. Don't feel like you have to.
Number 1, we need ADA compliant public bathrooms downtown 24/7, 365 days a year. I really appreciate the Asheville Downtown Association working with us to consider opening existing indoor facilities. The long-term cost analysis looks to be, and in fact is, double, just within 5 years. So that requires staffing. So I'm concerned about staffing capacity, which we've had issues with. It leaves me wondering what happens in 5 years. If we find it's too expensive and we've closed the bathrooms again, we will have nothing to show for it. The model we're currently considering is designed for safe use and ease of maintenance and is projected to cost less in the long run. Number 2, scarcity. I'm hearing concerns that there are competing needs for this funding, and indeed there are. There are still applications for ARPA funds that are left unfunded that are higher rated for equity and feasibility. What contributed to that scarcity? We spent $1.6 million fixing mistaken parking funds and loss in parking revenue. We also spent $500,000 filling gaps and cleaning up trash. So we have spent money in the ARPA fund process, and we're at the end, so that's contributing to the scarcity. Number 3, there's a false narrative of either or. We need funding for public bathrooms and Peak Academy. I hope that Peak Academy has provided a path to and applies for funding for either ARPA funds and or strategic partnership funds, and I intend to support it. And then 4, what gets left out? Funding for a low barrier shelter. Because we've depleted the ARPA funds through this process, we've regularly and knowingly chosen not to hold funds for a low barrier shelter, which is the top recommendation of the National Alliance to End Homelessness report that provides a path to reducing homelessness by 50%. So something does get left behind. It's a big deal that we don't have funding designated for all 3 of these really important issues in our community. And we will have to find other funding for the low barrier shelter. $500,000 isn't enough. But for me, public bathrooms is a matter of public health, and Peak Academy's work to address the opportunity gap in our schools and this gap of funding they have is really important. So I would like to say yes to public bathrooms and to Peak Academy.
So what does that mean? You'd also be willing to fund Peak the, what, 500,000 they requested out of ARPA funds?
Whether it's ARPA funds, strategic partnership funds, combination of both, we'll just have to find other funding for the low barrier shelter.
Do you know if we have 4 votes to fund Peak?
I'm
Does
not invited
anyone,
back
would
now.
anyone else like to weigh in
Of course,
on Peak?
yes, I would definitely support the peak funding.
And I agree with Kim. I don't think this is an either or. I think
It
there's a
should
way
do
that we
both.
can do both.
Yes.
And both meaning the restrooms and Peak Academy.
So for the full amount that they're asking, what is it, 500 or 450?
500.
Out of ARPA, how much do we have left in ARPA total?
Want to defer to, how much do we have left in ARPA funding?
Well, do we know that number? Because yeah.
Because what I'm saying is, after we do the bathroom, I'll make a motion to fund Peak.
Well, it's not, that's not on our agenda, so I don't know. I mean, we've got to follow the notice requirements.
Could we get that on the next agenda then? Could we pledge our support and then get it on the next agenda to vote?
I would like to look at that for the next agenda.
If we consider what was proposed for the Ramada Supportive Services, that's about, I believe, $500,000. And then we had about 540-something thousand left over that still needed to be allocated. So at least, I believe.
There's one other missing part.
$1 million.
My understanding was that we were going to make a path and invite Peak to apply.
Well, we haven't decided on the process
I think you just said
yet.
you were going to vote for it, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you want to do a
I
process?
said I
or do
intend
you-
to if they apply. I don't see an application from them.
I would agree, but I'm just trying to understand what you're.
If we have a path for them to apply, then I would intend to vote for it. I'm going to be consistent.
So
I just don't think this is an either or. We need the
I
bathrooms and
appreciate
Peak
you
Academy.
saying that, and I don't disagree with that. I'm trying to figure out if you're pushing us into something else right now, or if you're just suggesting that we consider reopening ARPA applications, which is a different conversation than what I heard you say initially.
My understanding is that they would need to apply. If I might have a different understanding from the conversation I've had with staff, then
Well,
would
I mean,
provide some
that's
clarity.
if we decide. I mean, we can make a
That is
funding
correct.
allocation from ARPA. I think it does need to be on the agenda. We have to have a notice it, but it's up to us whether or not we reopen an application process.
And there
Because
has
we
to
don't
be.
have to open up an application process.
Not
The
a
request can
process.
stand as an application process. You all suggested we go through an application process because you wanted it to be fair, but we determine what the process is.
That is correct.
So what they have submitted by email could be a formal request. We just have to call it.
It could be a request, but to actually qualify for ARPA funding, we have to have an application. So
Okay.
there will need to be an application.
So tonight
And
we're just.
but the application meets what criteria?
Deborah, when you say it needs to have an application, are you saying by our own requirements or by federal requirements? Or, I mean, I'm getting a
By
little
federal
confused here.
requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. And just to chime in, there's nothing stopping anyone, such as Peak, from submitting a request for ARPA funding, just as they've done, but to meet the federal guidelines so that we can report back on how the applications were judged. Doesn't have to be an official or a competitive process. They have to meet certain criteria that has to be provided to us informational, so that we can report that back as part of our ARPA funding.
And for eligibility requirements, we have to have an application.
Can we put this off
Federal
until we
government
figure
says-
all of this out as it relates to peak, so that the community won't think we're pitting one against the other? Because I'm going to tell you, and excuse my language beforehand, I got a call from a member of the community saying that we care more about where people take a shit than we do about Black children. And I don't want to leave that impression with the community. That's all I'm saying.
I hear that.
So can we do them in unison some kind of way?
So we could delay this to the agenda where we have both of them, and we just wrap up the ARPA funding?
I'd be happy to do
So,
that.
I think we'll probably have to go back to the drawing board, because I'm trying to understand what's happening here. Are we wanting to reopen ARPA applications and invite new applications, or are we just opening it for peak and that's it?
I don't want to reopen for everybody. What I would like to do is, since there's mentioned favor of them submitting the application or being a part of the process, I would like for them to submit an application so that they can be in alignment with what's required federally.
That's right. And the only concern that I would have about you all delaying is.
We have a bidding issue
We have
with this.
Yes, we have a bidding issue
And a
for
delay
these
on the bidding
costs.
issue would just be a financial
Correct.
consequence, and how much is that
A-
consequence?
Fairly significant, but go ahead.
So essentially, when we bid a project, it's valid for a period of time. And in this case, we reached out on
Extended it.
January 23rd. After that meeting, we reached out to contractors, and we got information that they'd hold the bids for a month. So essentially, by the end of February. Beyond that, we wouldn't have an idea of what the consequences would be, because we would have to rebid both of those contracts, and that would be subject to whatever the bids turned out to be.
Which I can assure you will be higher.
Okay. Well, I just wanna
Because
ask
we
a
chose the
question.
lowest bid by
May I ask
law.
a question, please?
Yeah.
I'm still, could someone sort of give me an idea of how much money or funds do we have left? If that would,
So we had,
We're getting
okay,
ready
so
to-
we had the project for the permanent supportive housing, which was $500,000. We had about $500,000 left in this fund that was unallocated. And then we have this project, which was around 600 or so, but some's already been spent.
650,000 was approved and 81,000 has been spent to date.
So unallocated, and the part for the low barrier shelter is about $1 million. And then there's this project. So if you don't spend the money on this project, you're around a little over $1.5 million.
And if you do, we're down to what? A little over 5?
Say it
Is that what
again?
we're saying?
What are you asking?
So after, assuming this will be approved, if it's voted on and approved tonight, how much is left?
$1 million.
About $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
Okay, which is,
So
which
still-
exceeds their request.
yes,
Peaks
in the first
exactly,
place.
exactly. So,
Request. Yes, ma'am.
so like you said, it's not either or. I mean, we can
We could
do
do both.
both.
That's
That's like
correct.
Shaniqua, yeah,
Well, it
for
almost
sure.
sounds like we could do all three, right?
Yeah, exactly, we could do
All
all three.
three
What's the
being.
third?
What's
Well,
the
they
third?
just- we
The
just
low
have
barrier shelter for the
a
last
lower
amount.
amount for low barrier, and we can.
It's
Yeah.
gonna fall short on the low barrier shelter partnership.
But it could be pledged towards that.
What are you saying?
I mean, the amount that will need to happen for the low barrier shelter would be over $500,000, correct? But this could be pledged toward that, toward whatever gap we're trying to see.
The $500,000 in ARPA could be pledged, so if it's $3 million, we've got
We are
$500,000
$500,000 on the way?
Yes, okay, I'm understanding you. I am getting a hand raise from Sage, and Sage has got some kind of delay. So Sage, are you ready to?
Hey, I'm here.
Okay.
I think it's a great conversation. I want to lend my support to the idea that we get organized and come back. I'm hearing enough support to basically reopen an application, not new applications, but look at Peak accepting their email as of interest, having them complete an application, looking at the others. So if more details can be aligned about this low barrier shelter. And I'm also curious if every other funding partner or grantee was actually fully funded. Like, is there, sometimes when we get some of these funds, they come back and 10,000 here, 4,000
Right. I think
on
what
the
you're
table, but they're pieces. But my support is just to look at them holistically, because if we can do something for Peak and bathrooms and reserve some money for a shelter, then it sounds like a home run for all of you.
Do the breakdown again if we consider all three.
I think so this would, if we do approve this, it would bring us down to $1 million. If you did $500,000 for Peak, that leaves $500,000. And I think what Maggie was saying was, well, we could pledge the $500,000 towards a low barrier shelter when that comes together, which is happening pretty quickly, and led by the county with us in partnership with them. The county has set aside $3.6 or $8 million for a low barrier shelter. So we would not be meeting them halfway, in other words.
So this would get us started. Consider fund balance.
We could always consider.
We can always do that.
May not be
And do a match.
What does it look like to make the most use of our tax dollars and meet the bid requirement? To say something like, move to approve this project with bringing Peak Academy and the remainder of the ARPA funds for low barrier shelter commitment to our next agenda. Would that have enough support?
I mean, I get the desire to demonstrate our commitment to all the things. But I think what I'm hearing is that we're inviting Peak to make an application for consideration. So that's heard. I think that's heard. That just happened. So I don't know that we need to tangle it up with this. I don't know exactly how we would do that. But
I'm surprised that we would want to deplete the funds even more by delaying this one. That's the part that's still sticking. We don't know how much it will cost.
Right. In other words, it's going to cost more if we delay it. Yeah, so I'm not suggesting we delay this. I'm just saying I don't know that you need to intertwine them, because anything could happen.
I have a question. Jade, do you know the exact date? Oh, because we don't have another council meeting this month.
Well, we do. We have one on February 27th.
I'm going to have to check with staff on what they were, conversation they had with the contractor. I don't know the exact date that they agreed upon.
I was hearing a request for us to delay this so we could consider them together and not pit them against each other, but.
And I really don't think that it's appropriate to say that they're pitted against one another. We put this project in with a long list of projects when we considered ARPA. Peak didn't exist when we voted to fund. This is just coming forward at this time. So I'm not exactly sure why that's the narrative, because this has just been long in the pipeline coming to us.
I'm responding to the many people who reached out to me this week. Some of them are
It's a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
I think it would,
about this.
well, and it would be our fault if that's the narrative, because we're the ones that are pushing this forward. And I think we need to help explain to the community that this project is.
I think they're reading the direction we were going, because it almost felt like we weren't going to consider Peak. But then when this came up, it looked as if this was going to get a lot of support. So naturally, they made the correlation.
From also what I understand, there is a thought that their full request, or it's not the desire of the board to fund their full request. So then if we vote on this and then put it off, who knows if some other party will come through and will go, Peak, instead of 500, we'll give you 50,000. So I think that's part of the
I understand.
thought
And we
process.
have given 50,000 to Peak through the Strategic Partnership Fund this year. So does council want to move forward with this tonight, with the understanding that we're having another conversation later about the remaining ARPA funds?
If that's the will of the body, then so be it, but my vote will be a no. Once we actually take the vote.
And my
So if
support
it's
for
the-
yes is to save money and not deplete money from the low barrier shelter because we delayed it. So I appreciate the position.
Why don't we, since, I think Jay said something about they need to know by the end of February, right? So our next meeting, would that be in time for us if we, took 2 weeks to sort of discuss this and then come back?
I just don't know the exact date. Like I said, I'd have to go and meet with, or check with staff on what their extension was. I know in the January 23rd meeting, they got an extension. I believe it was a month. So that wouldn't get us to the 27th.
If we take a quick break, do you want to find out?
I can certainly try.
Council, just for awareness, generally speaking, after council approves an item like this, there is usually an additional period where we are going through the contracting stage. So if we leave ourselves with just a day or so, it could put in jeopardy, again, those quotes, since it usually takes a little bit of time to finalize the agreement with those parties. So we can always do our very best, but I do want to make you aware of that potential risk.
Well, the only thing I'm seeing here is, as far as what I'm seeing that we look like we do have support for council for the full amount for peak. So that being said, even if we vote on this tonight to keep it from, being jeopardized, we still have a good chance of getting peak what they want, and then we can adjust. So I don't really see an issue with voting for this and keeping it on track, because we do have support right now to support peak. So
maybe that was a motion.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah. So I move to approve the adoption of the resolution. Okay. I'm making sure I got the right one up.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yes, it's right. Okay. I move to approve the adoption of a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a construction contract with B. Allen Construction and Company for the installation of a prefabricated restroom outside of Rankin Avenue parking garage in the amount of $183,620. Further authorizing the city manager to execute any change orders that may arise during the project up to the contingency amount of $46,724. And the adoption of a resolution authorizing the purchase of a prefabricated single-occupant restroom structure from Madden Fabrication in the amount of $170,760 for the downtown restroom project.
Second. Thank you.
Your years as a flight attendant come out sometimes.
I know.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment. I'm going to.
You do, Mayor.
Wait, I'm sorry. We do, and I'm sorry, this is not, so this isn't, I'm not opening a public hearing. I've got general, I'm sorry. All right, we have a few folks signed up to speak under public comment, and I think everyone's a pro at this, so we'll go ahead with Jonathan Wainscott.
And Mayor, while Mr. Wainscott's approaching, we did find out that we would have to rebid if the vote is not taken.
Do it what?
Just got that.
We would have to rebid. Time-wise would not permit it
delayed.
to be continued to the next meeting under the existing bids.
Because we've already extended it once.
Yes, I'm ready. My name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I am concerned about the funding source for this. This is the American Rescue Plan, and I'm not really sure who we're rescuing with this money. To me, this problem has existed before peak. Now, I understand that the idea to get this problem ameliorated came before peak, and I'm glad that we're talking about peak for sure. But to me, what we're rescuing with using this ARPA money is years of mismanagement, and I don't understand how Asheville is the county seat of Buncombe County, and we don't have enough toilet seats in the city in 2023. I mean, this is an issue that should have been dealt with better planning and better priorities spending in the past. And what we do spend on one thing displaces something else. And, the money from a rescue plan should be used to help the people who are most impacted by the pandemic, the year in pajamas. And one of the biggest injuries of the pandemic was to our children's education. And so by funding this thing, which we all need, I'm totally I think we need to go ahead and get the bathroom turned on. All we have to do is turn the water on. We're that far away from having an operational bathroom right now. Turn the water on and we got one. That's all we got to do. We've waited this long. You should wait on this vote because we will be displacing money from other things that should take a greater priority in the town in general. We can have all these things, but there are a limited number of things that we can do with this rescue money. And I don't feel like spending this money rescuing just years of us partying and playing with the money and buying everything else that we want and not paying attention to our most essential things. And this all looks sloppy, and nobody knows how much money we've got in. How much money's left in the account before we vote on spending it? This is embarrassing. This is sloppy again in Asheville, North Carolina. Also, I think that poo management is an issue of Health and Human Services. So go get the money from the county, go get the money from the TDA. There's plenty of money over this. $40 million mountain of money at the Tourism Development Authority. Who is also responsible for all of the degradation of our bathrooms? The people that we've welcomed here to get well and help. Things are getting torn apart by who? And why don't we have enough money to police it? Again, who made these decisions? Why are we here now? Being better? Walk the walk instead of talking the talk and get your ass in gear and get it together.
Thank you. Next up, we have Paul Howard.
All right, council, city manager, city attorney, Jerry out in the hall that gets everybody signed up to speak, and of course Maggie, the glue that holds everything together. Good evening. All right, we're here once again about this supporting and lieu, which in the eyes of the community, mine included, view this desire to place this fancy porta-john where it's not needed as just another poor decision amongst the many of wasteful spending of the taxpayers' money by this council. Shangri-La, foreclosed property. Y'all can't do anything with it, I guess, unless you buy it back from them out of foreclosure. You got the big garage down there on Asheville. Nobody's using it, taking about 3 blocks of property. It's growing a river around it. Then we got these electric buses. $5 million worth of crap sitting over there that can't be used. All right, none of these ventures resulted in any positive returns. Yet still, we keep pushing forward for that. Mr. Gene Bell, a lifelong resident and employee of the city in some capacity, pleaded with you all to provide Peak Academy with funding to be able to continue closing the achievement gap up in these mountains. Aren't y'all for equal education? To vote against this requested funding would surely be the lowest of the lowest disregard for acts of this council perpetrated against a community that's just as progressive in teaching the unteachable and unreachable children as y'all are progressive about hotels, bike lanes, empty garages, foreclosed buildings, closed down bathrooms, and electric buses. The glaring difference is being y'all's progressiveness is placing and keeping the city in a hole, thereby making it necessary to sell more of Asheville to make up for lost money. While Peak's progressiveness is providing future assets to our city and our community. The funding pleaded for by Mr. Bell is far below the $5 million being wasted on charging ports, chargers. These are charging ports on buses that aren't even drivable. The city can give Peak the funding requested and still feel good about the $4,350,000 that will still be wasted on the useless buses. The local community, black and white, not just this part, not that part, black and white, are beyond exasperated with this council that continues to place their own personal progressive agenda of bringing and serving transplants with money while doing nothing for the people they work for. Now, if the seats of the incumbents are equal to a bathroom that's not needed, go for it. The community has had enough. The same people whose votes got you on this council will be the same very people whose votes get you off of it. Thank you.
Elise Martyr.
Hello again. I think it's really important that we not convolute a bunch of the different various issues that have come up tonight. I think all of those are very worthwhile projects, and that this is a yes and situation where there's money for all of these projects mentioned tonight, and we don't have to pit them against the other. So I come to you in support of the installation of the 24/7 bathroom at the College and Rankin intersection. Staff have provided an analysis of existing options and how they compare to the Portland Loo. And while it's prudent to explore existing options, I want to call your attention to the intentional design features that make the Portland Loo advantageous over existing interior bathrooms. The prefab bathroom is specifically designed for high traffic areas. It's built to withstand greater demands than the current interior bathrooms. It can be power washed. I don't think they can do that to the interior bathrooms. It's also built with materials which are resistant to graffiti and vandalism. Again, the same cannot be said for the existing interior bathrooms. It is uniquely designed to ward off certain criminal behaviors, and it does so by using louvres designed for privacy while also allowing visibility into the lower and upper portions of the unit's walls, as well as blue lights, which present challenges for intravenous drug users. An interior bathroom has none of these preventative features. While these features will not prevent 100% of illicit use, it does something. And criminal activity is going to be associated with most all neglected, unsupervised spaces. It's important to note that the restroom will most certainly serve more than the unhoused population, and that intravenous drug use is not isolated to the unhoused community. However, I understand these are some chief concerns for some residents and feel that those are important features to highlight. Enlisting homeless services facilities to provide more restroom access to the unhoused population is not sufficient, as they are located on the outskirts of downtown. Further, the restroom will also serve other members of our community. It's incorrect to think users of this restroom will be isolated to the unhoused population. The bathroom is also ADA compliant. When facilities are designed to be ADA compliant, they help people from all walks of life, from those using mobility aids to parents with children. The residents and visitors of our city deserve a clean, accessible bathroom facility. You have already approved funds for this restroom at the May 10th, 2022 council meeting, which was passed unanimously. Staff have dedicated time and energy in pursuit of this facility per your earlier instructions. And the installation of the Portland Loo would be an addition to the city's bathroom facilities, not a replacement. Please follow through on your earlier commitment. Please vote in support of this facility. Doing so will improve the safety and cleanliness of downtown and demonstrate the city's commitment to accessibility. Thank you.
Kimberly Collins.
Protocol having been established, I'm just going to jump right into it. How dare we, how can we, as a city, even consider the kind of spend on a single toilet for basically the houseless folks here in Asheville, amongst others, when Asheville's educational achievement gap is the worst in North Carolina. Peak Academy, a school actually closing that gap, has made the request. So y'all have literally stolen a lot of my thunder, but I think y'all need to still hear this message. It's great that you all are considering the full amount. However, it was stated to Peak Academy when Councilwoman Maggie visited, they were asked a myriad of questions that other groups who have petitioned and applied, which Peak has applied for funding, just so I can state that as well. They were asked questions such as, can't you just raise the money? Can't you ask the parents to raise the money? And I think the most egregious question that was asked was that, could you just feed the children cheaper food? How dare you stand in front of that school who is doing everything that they can to close the achievement gap by leaps and bounds to feed the children cheaper food. You put more care into probably feeding your dog or cat. So exactly what does feeding cheaper food actually mean? What does that look like? Peanut butter and jelly? A crust of bread? How dare you?
Ms. Collins, could you please direct your comments to all of us? I'm sorry.
How dare y'all? And there you have it. That was a simple fix. Here's the thing. We've discovered now that the funding is there. So I am asking that instead of dying on this mountain of a $600,000, $500,000 single toilet, whatever that cost is, that you do consider peak in the fullness of the amount that they have asked for, not that just, well, maybe we can throw you some crumbs, which is obviously what you all consider feeding them. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, you've been doing great. You've been doing great. So just keep it up with them. We're almost, we have one more speaker under this item, Anthony. Anthony, and help me with the pronunciation of your last name. Mejia? Mejia.
It's a Spanish name.
Thank you.
My name is Anthony Mejia, and I actually work for the nonprofit program called Umoja, which we work in support of Peak Academy. And this nice lady before me took most of my thunder. But I wanted to make a point here in saying that all the egregious things I've heard today, I wanted you to know who it is exactly you're taking this money away from. I can't give you their names because I respect their privacy enough, but I've worked with these children almost every day. These are children that are in the most vital stages of their lives. Children who don't have the confidence that they can read until someone sits down with them and shows them they can. And then they start reading so much beyond what you expect. They're amazing children. They're intelligent, and they've been through some of the worst that this country has to offer. When you're talking about people take away food, to take away money from, you are choosing the most disenfranchised children you possibly could choose. These are kids who have lost family members and who know it. There are plenty of children in my family and families I've seen that they protect theirs, they protect their children, but they don't hide the truth from them either. They know their trauma, they know their family's trauma, and they know the systems put in place that exacerbates their trauma. And all you do today by taking away their funding is confirming their own biases against a system that already feels to them that it's given up on them. Bathrooms are important. It does matter where someone takes a shit. But I don't see how that takes away from keeping food in the mouths of children, making sure they're well fed, making sure their education's funded. I didn't really have a plan or a speech just come up here. I can tell you about the kids I talked to, the ones who tell me about the families that they lost, about the trauma they've seen, the ones who a month ago would be considered bad kids who did nothing but disrupt the classroom, and now they're coming up to me excited about learning their spelling words, about learning to read, excited that they have an opportunity, and they don't know anything about tonight. They don't know anything about a group of council people they've never known, deciding their futures, deciding what food goes into their bellies, deciding the value of their education. And they may never know unless they're actually taught what they need to be taught to be working, valuable citizens, people of Asheville. Bathrooms are important. For God's sakes, put a bathroom in downtown. We need it. But we also need children. That's kind of an important thing to keep society going. I'm only getting so angry because I see those kids' faces every day, and I will see the end result of their funding being taken away, of them being abandoned. So I I wish I could end this more elegantly, but frankly, I have more important work to do, and I hope you take the time to support that work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, okay, good. We have a motion and a second, and those are our speakers under this item. So council, ready to vote? Any other questions? Great. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, Jade, thank you very much. We're going to move over to new business, and I'm going to turn over to the Vice Mayor. We have, the first item is a resolution appointing a member to the Downtown Commission. I have here for you, but I don't think we necessarily need to do that. We just need to pick somebody for the Downtown Commission. Since this list is a little bit aged for us, and for example, Byron Griner's on it, but now he's already on P&Z, so he can't be on both.
Excuse me, I thought the recommendation already came from the boards and commissions.
It did for.
And the recommendation from boards and commission
Was for Noor? Okay, so is that the motion?
Yes.
So for Noor,
And
to
boards
be
and commission-
reappointed
That
because
was
she's,
from, do you want me to pull up the minutes from Boards and Commissions Committee? That was definitely the recommendation,
Yeah.
but then it got deferred. We kept her seat open, but
Yeah.
she was still in.
okay.
So this is her reappointment.
So there was a little confusion. I think the thought was that the seat that is normally held for
Oh, right, we
now
got that.
Hayden.
Thank you for reminding us.
But as it turns out, that is a separate seat that's
Already
already
there.
set,
Yeah.
already there. So it wasn't pitting Noor
I
against
think we got
Hayden.
confused because she actually applied, so that was
Right.
confusing.
And
So
so-
like a reappointment.
Right, so
Yes.
Hayden's seat is there, and so we voted unanimously to reappoint Noor.
As, from boards and commissions, so that
Yes.
is the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was there a motion made?
I made the well,
Yes, she made.
I
the-
move that we recommend Noor.
The re-
And Sandra, I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the next one is a resolution appointing a member to the Metropolitan Sewage District Board of Directors, and I suspect that Antoinette may have a motion.
Well, I move to reappoint Gwen Whistler.
Okay, do we have a
Sandra, I'll
second?
second.
All right, we have a motion and a,
I did.
Sandra.
Maggie. Ooh,
Sorry. Multitasking.
she's multitasking.
I am going to provide a comment before this vote that I really appreciate people who are willing to serve on our boards and commissions. Our MSD is so important, and I appreciate that the mayor's on our MSD. I think there should be a council member, and there were multiple that were available in our last meeting, so that will reflect in my vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to reappoint Gwen Whistler. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No?
Okay, got it, Maggie? Okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to move into general public comment. We have at least one person who has signed up to speak for a group who will get 10 minutes, but otherwise you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And let me just make sure. And I'm sorry, I can see we're not going to get to everyone, but we're going to begin and do the best we can. Good. Okay. So the first person signed up to speak is Sandy Aldridge. Oh, and so I'll try to tell you if you're on deck then. So Sandy, as you make your way forward, Naomi Friedman, you are on deck. And just pull that microphone. Yeah. You know the drill.
Yes. Thank you all for allowing me to come here and speak. I'll make this pretty quick. I wrote something, but I threw that away.
They can't hear you.
You can't? Okay.
There you go.
All right. So I'm co-chair of the Transit Committee for the City of Asheville. There have been a lot of things happening lately, but I'm going to talk about the main one. A lot of the drivers, and I mean a lot, are not arriving to their buses on time. They're not getting to the buses on time. And according to the schedule for the city buses, they're supposed to leave at the top of the hour, bottom of the hour, 20 till whatever it is. And a lot of them are not doing that. And I've had tons of people come to me and say, this is wrong. Our fares pay for there to be a schedule and for the schedule to be followed. So I'm just letting you know that if someone could make that happen to where the customers, your constituents, are made to feel better about that, then that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'm assuming folks involved with transit were taking notes. Yes. Okay, thank you. So Naomi Friedman is next, and on deck is is Monica Buckley.
Should we do the hand raise to cede their time to her?
Yeah, well, let's see, Elisa Gura and Lori Johnson, Eva Blinder, Iris Zohar, and Perry Drawer. If you all would just raise your hand so we can acknowledge your ceding your time to Naomi Friedman. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to ask those who have come tonight to support this presentation to stand, please. The ideas, sentiments, and requests that I'm expressing tonight are the grassroots efforts of many Jews, both present tonight and not present, young and old, religious and secular, of diverse ethnic backgrounds. On October 7th, 3,000 terrorists invaded Israel, raped, tortured, massacred men, women, and children, burned families alive, kidnapped babies, and committed the most horrific atrocities of the 21st century. In response, anti-Israel activists around the world rallied, calling for the end to the Jewish state. Here in Asheville, on October 7th, the Party for Socialism and Liberation and others called for protest in Pack Square based on the lie claiming Israel, not Hamas, but Israel, is currently carrying out a massacre of historic proportion. They said this while Israel was still struggling to defeat terrorists inside its borders, before rescuers had found all the babies that parents had hidden in washing machines and in cupboards in order to save them, surrendering themselves and being slaughtered. After their rally, the protesters proclaimed that they were proud to stand with Palestine, by which they meant Hamas, in its just counter-offensive. That is, October 7th, a just counter-offensive. Protesters in Asheville were not alone. Across the country, anti-Israel groups celebrated Hamas's ingenuity. Posters proudly bore the image of Hamas terrorists paragliding into Israel. These protesters call to globalize the Intifada. What does globalize the Intifada? What are the protesters on the streets of Asheville calling for? In Israel, over 1,000 civilians have been stabbed to death, burnt alive, and blown to bits by suicide bombers in intifadas within Israel. 1,000 people murdered in intifadas in Israel. Globalize the Intifada is a call for indiscriminate violence and acts of terrorism against Jews everywhere, including here in Asheville. These protesters have made this call, and they have answered this call. In the first month after October 7th, these groups physically assaulted Jews on at least 20 different college campuses within the United States. 3 out of 4 Jewish students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism on their campus since October 7th. That's 75% of Jewish students in the United States of America today. The ADL has reported a staggering 3,291 anti-Semitic incidents just in the 3 months following October 7th. including 1,347 cases of harassment, 554 acts of vandalism, 56 physical assaults, including one which resulted in death. Around the world, anti-Semitism has increased 500%. But it's not just the number of these incidents that frightens us, it is the increasing in severity. As in Nazi Germany, mobs are marching through our streets, crying out hate speech against Jews. They surround Jewish-owned businesses and private homes. They smash windows, steal and vandalize religious symbols, and set fires to restaurants, institutions, and even to Jewish students' dorms. This is not protesting against a war. This is not legitimate criticism against a government's policy. This is anti-Semitism. Hate crime follows hate speech when that hate speech is left unchallenged. That has been the Jewish experience in America over the past 20 years. We've seen this on college campuses, in Jewish communities around the world, and we are seeing this here in Asheville. Referencing Hitler's final solution and the intifadas that killed so many Jews in Israel, Asheville protesters proclaim, there is only one solution, intifada revolution. Solution, one solution, Hitler's final solution. Intifada revolution, Hamas's October 7th. If you repeat it enough, people begin to believe it. If you repeat it enough, people act on it. In Asheville, since October 7th, we have received bomb threats against local Jewish institutions and death threats against local Jewish leaders. We have witnessed stalking, vandalism, and disruption. You probably know the details better than we do, but what you might not know is that our Jewish community no longer publicly announces many events due to fear of violence. That's not okay, and we need you to take action. I'm sure you don't want the Jewish people or any other minority to live like this in our community. We have come here tonight to ask you to join 43 nations and hundreds of local governments that have adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, known as IRA. We must define it to fight it. When anti-Israel protesters claim that burning Jewish babies alive in ovens while forcing their parents to watch is a just counter-offensive, that is anti-Semitism. When they claim that gang-raping Jews is a moral and legal response to anything, that is anti-Semitism. When they call self-defense genocide, that is anti-Semitism. When they cry out, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, free, free Palestine, they are calling for the annihilation of all Jewish people in an entire region. That is anti-Semitism. When they call for a ceasefire that is intended only to preserve and protect the Hamas terrorist regime so that October 7th can happen again and again, as Hamas has said that it will do, that is anti-Semitism. We need to fight bad speech with good speech. We ask Asheville City Council to condemn these statements as anti-Semitic. Regarding a ceasefire, we want peace. But a ceasefire now will not protect the Palestinians in Gaza who have suffered horrifically under the terrorist regime, as Hamas strives to maximize civilian deaths. A ceasefire now will leave Hamas intact and will allow it to reestablish itself, to endanger its own people, Israeli civilians, and other people. It will leave Hamas intact. It will also put our Jewish community at risk. As protesters call for a ceasefire resolution, They repeat anti-Semitic claims over and over. Claims we heard last week in this room, not last week, but the last time we met in this session, we heard in this room. Unchallenged, that puts Jews in our community at risk. Therefore, we ask you to follow the precedent of Chapel Hill and pass a resolution that Asheville will not take a stand on a ceasefire. Hate crime follows hate speech when it is unchallenged. Please adopt IRA, condemn the anti-Semitic rhetoric protesters are using, and vote not to take a stand on a ceasefire resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, I just want to tell you guys, you're doing great and you're being very respectful of each speaker, and I appreciate that. And I think that's important that we demonstrate that here in Asheville, and I know this is a deeply important and emotional issue for a lot of people, including myself. And so I respect you all for doing your best to respect each speaker, and we're beginning this process tonight, so it's going to continue. The next person signed up to speak is Monica Buckley, and then Babette Mays.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you want to pull that up. Naomi's lot. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you all again for listening to us. I do want to say that it's not my experience that everybody here is respectful when someone's up here talking about the fear of Jews that has been triggered, and especially we're seeing a lot of repeat behaviors that were in fact part of 1939 Nazi Germany. And if anybody has any questions about why we say that, I'd be really happy to either point you into the direction that you can find that information or just tell you. And while that's happening, our friendly comrades here are like giggling at it, like it's funny. And I just think that's something that needs to be noted. The group that will be taking hours of your time tonight is organized by the PSL, which is a political organization dedicated to Marxist revolution by any means necessary. Read Nazi Germany, China, Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea. These are proponents of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a terrorist group still active in Gaza and the West Bank. Please understand that. Let's see. Oh, this terrorist group was actually directly involved in the massacre of 10/7 and proudly proclaimed their support on Telegraph and their own website. It doesn't recognize the validity of Israel's existence and calls regularly for the liberation of all historical Palestine. Also, to quote this group, we call upon all resistance forces inside and outside of Palestine to take their positions in the trenches of confrontation which stretch now throughout all the area. Glory to the martyrs and victory to the resistance. And please remember that what happened on 10/7 is what the people here that will be taking your time tonight call their freedom fighters, the resistance, the freedom fighters. Nobody has the freedom to mass rape. Nobody has the freedom to burn alive. Nobody has the freedom to torture and dismember children in front of their parents. Nobody has the freedom to behead people. Palestine executed a campaign of systematic elimination of Jews.
Folks, thank you. I'm sorry. And not everyone is here tonight to speak on this topic, so I'm going to, Babette Mays is next, and then Alma Atkins.
Okay, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and City Council. I am here just as a private citizen. I am part of reparations. It's a passion of mine, something that I was doing before reparations came into being. I would say that I was born in the late 50s during segregation. I was raised during the integration process. I know all the fears and all the things that have happened to our people. And this is Black History Month, so I would take the time to say that the harm that was done to us, there is no monetary value that could be given back to us that has happened to us and our ancestors. But I am here to say that we're always the last to receive anything. Peak Academy, when I was growing up, there was no place for us other than you survive or you don't survive. So Peak Academy would be something that would be important for us that we didn't have. So please support their efforts and what they're doing to make a difference in our youth. Because during our time, there were still people that didn't even make it past the 8th grade because they could not do the reading, the writing, and the standards that was made for us. I am an advocate for housing, and that's for housing for everyone. That's an advocate for the people that have been displaced for generations, and now they're living in Bartlett Arms and in Aston Park Towers, where they have to live now with people that have mental illness, drug abuse, and all of those problems, and they have to live there in fear. And they're scared to come out of their homes, and they need to have more dignity than what we afford them to do. So I asked you, as you think about all of these things, it's so much that has to go with flag lots. That was why I came tonight, was because of flag lots, because it is going into our neighborhoods. We're RS8s. We want to be RS4. Take that away from them coming in to do that to us.
Thank you.
Do I get my other 2 minutes? Or was that 4?
Only 2. You can't give your time. You can't give your time.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alma Atkins. Oh,
That's
I'm
her.
sorry. Okay, it said Procul. All right. Anne Krang and then Gigi Greenwald.
You should have a resolution that I've tried to do 3 times already. Hopefully you have it tonight.
Pull that, please. Yes, pull that down, please.
Okay, I'm going to talk really fast so I can get in under 2 minutes. I'm Ann Craig. I've lived here for 46 years. I'm the child of Eastern European Jewish immigrants who came to the West in the early 20th century because of persecution. I was an educator and co-founded several schools in Asheville, including the Shalom Children's Center at the JCC. In 2015, I was a main organizer of a discussion group between local Jews and Palestinians to learn about and discuss the history of the relationship between the modern state of Israel and the Palestinian people, and to discuss how it affects us. Because I've experienced prejudice against me as a Jewish child, because I am a human being who believes in respect and dignity for all, it has become impossible for me.
I apologize.
No, Maggie.
For me, I get extra time then. I'm sorry, I'm quite nervous.
It has become impossible is where you were. Ann.
What's that?
You were at, it has become impossible.
It has become impossible for me to justify our government's silence about the horrific situation for the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Why am I asking this body to endorse a ceasefire resolution? Because the majority of the American people support it, and our national representatives have thus far refused to. I have personally met twice with our congressional representatives and our congressperson, because many of your constituents are feeling psychological pain, anxiety, and fear. A lot of us. Members of our community who have family or friends in the region are worried for their safety, even for their survival. And many local residents are feeling the effects of this profound moral crisis on their consciences. Because Pratt & Whitney Corporation, which was brought here by the business and government elite of our state and county, makes parts for the engines of the planes bombing the people of Gaza. Because the hungry, sick, mangled, orphaned, terrified children need a ceasefire now. Because an immediate ceasefire must occur to stop the killing, to be able to begin to allow the delivery of desperately needed humanitarian aid. Because over 1,500 local people have added their voices to support this resolution. You should not fear supporting a ceasefire. You should fear unending violence and our complicity in it. City Council must speak for humanity, for all those who have died, been injured, or traumatized, for the children of Asheville whose needs are not met because taxes for weapons and war take priority to human needs. For my neighbor's children, for all the children I taught, for my grandchildren, for the courageous, thoughtful, and committed young people.
So Gigi
who will
Greenwald
speak
is the
after
next
me.
speaker.
For peace and our
Thank you.
Please support this resolution.
Thank you.
And send it to our congressional representative.
Hello, my name is Gigi Greenwald, and I'm a Jewish constituent of Asheville, North Carolina, speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. This is a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, whereas a representative in Congress represents over 650,000 people, whereas local elected officials in the United States of America take an oath of office promising to support the U.S. Constitution, whereas representing constituents to higher levels of government is part of that oath. Whereas citizens, towns, counties routinely and are properly send petitions to Congress for all kinds of requests allowed under Clause 3, Rule 7, Section 819 of the Rules of the House of Representatives. Whereas in 1967, a court in California ruled in Farley versus Healy in favor of citizens' rights to place a referendum on the ballot opposing the Vietnam War, ruling, quote, as representatives of local communities, board of supervisors, and city councils have traditionally made declarations of policy on matters of concern to the community, whether or not they had power to effectuate such declarations by binding legislation. Indeed, one of the purposes of local government is to represent its citizens before the Congress, the legislature, and administrative agencies in matters over which the local government has no power. Even in matters of foreign policy, it is not uncommon for local legislative bodies to make their positions known. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak, and before they speak up, is Ryan Langdon, and then it'll be Maddie Anderson. And if everyone could sit down, please, we need you to, thank you so much. You can, okay, please proceed.
My name is Ryan Langdon, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. I will continue to read the presented resolution. Whereas the ongoing assault in Gaza has resulted in catastrophic loss of Palestinian lives, injuries, destruction, and increasing hostilities, which threaten the existence of the Palestinians as a people and widens war in the region, and has not resulted in the release of the Israeli hostages, nor promoted true safety for anyone. Whereas the United States is funding and enabling this ongoing assault by sending taxpayer-funded weapons to Israel, and its national administration is enabling the assault by refusing to call for an immediate and complete ceasefire. Whereas San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Detroit, Atlanta, Seattle, and other local governments have already passed resolutions urging the U.S. government to support an immediate and complete ceasefire in Gaza. Therefore, be it resolved that the city of Asheville declares its support for an immediate and durable ceasefire, the immediate delivery of ample and life-saving humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians, for freeing of all hostages, and for an end to anti-Semitic, anti-Palestinian, Islamophobic, and all xenophobic rhetoric and attacks across our country, and will submit this resolution to the congressional representative.
Okay, Maddie Anderson, and then Kim Grinnell.
No longer speaking due to time constraint.
Okay. Then it will be Mancy Ariane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kim Grinnell. I'm an Asheville Jew, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. Zionism emerged in the late 19th century in response to the Western phenomenon of racialized anti-Semitism. Its founder, Theodore Herzl, proposed it as the answer to centuries of oppression of European Jews at the hands of European states and rulers. However, unlike movements for national liberation among other oppressed peoples, Zionism was conceived from the beginning as a colonial project, and the clear intent of Zionists has been the formation of a Jewish ethno-state in Palestine through the displacement and ultimately the destruction of the indigenous Palestinian people. And you don't have to take our word for it. You can simply let the Zionist and Israeli leaders tell you who they've always been. Theodore Herzl wrote a letter to Cecil Rhodes, the architect of Britain's colonial empire in Africa, seeking his support for the Zionist colonization of Palestine. Quote, he said, you are being invited to help me make history. It doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor. Not Englishmen, but Jews. How then do I happen to turn to you, since this is an out-of-the-way matter for you? How indeed? Because it is something colonial, end quote. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, laid out the clear aims of Zionists to as far back as 1928, quote, "We do not recognize the right of Palestinian Arabs to rule the country since Palestine is still undeveloped and awaits its builders." Unquote. Golda Meir denied even the existence of Palestinian people, saying there was no such thing as Palestinians. In just the last few months, the current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember," unquote. A statement which has been cited by the International Court of Justice as evidence of incitement to genocide. From their own mouths. Thank you.
Could you repeat your name?
Kim Grinnell.
Okay, so it was Maddie Anderson that was not speaking any longer. Okay, I'm sorry. So then we're up to Mancy, and you'll help me say your last name correctly.
Ariane.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My last name,
Is-
Ariane.
Yeah, Ariane. Okay, thank you.
Dear Madam Sir, I'm Nancy, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. The British took control of the historical Palestine after World War I. They made two mutually exclusive promises, a promise to the leaders of the Great Arab Revolt and the Balfour Declaration of the Zionists. While Jewish, Palestinian, and new immigrants were less than 10% of the population, the British promised them a national home in Palestine. Since then, the machine of colonization had been empowered. Palestinians knew from the beginning that Zionists would mean that their erasure from Palestine. The mayor of Jerusalem knew it in the late 1800s and voiced that opinion in the letter he wrote to Herzl. Palestinians knew that as the land sales by feudal landowners and Zionist immigration changed the demographic of the land, the price would be borne by the Palestinian peasants. From 1936 to 1939, Palestinians organized a massive general strike and began liberation struggle, and that was violently crushed by the colonial government with the aid of British trained and equipped Zionist militia. The 1948 Nakba wasn't a war between two nations. It was an assault by a heavily armed and well-funded Zionist military that already had a history of terrorist atrocities under British colonial rule on a poorly organized and equipped Palestinian militias and the population as a whole. Quickly, more than 750,000 Palestinians were pushed out of their town after several massacres, killed more than 15,000 Palestinians, half of the number of the Palestinians killed during the current as an assault in Gaza.
Next, thank you very much. The next person signed up to speak is Walid Kabaha, and then Walter Horn.
Hi, I'm Walid, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. In 1967, the Arabs did not attack or wage war in Israel, but Israel, armed and equipped with modern US-made weapons, attacked Egypt, Syria, and Jordan and took complete control of the West Bank and Gaza. Despite the UN resolution that declared that the seizure of these lands is a violation of international law, the occupation has continued to this day. My mom was born in 1967, and I was born 27 years later, and both of us were born under a brutal military occupation. An occupation that reminded us every day of its monstrosity. I watched the apartheid fences and walls being built around my town, and I was in Jerusalem when the Second Intifada erupted, and I had to run out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque holding my dad's hand under the gunfire. And I was there when Jenin refugee camp, whose inhabitants were kicked out of their homes in 1948, was surrounded and destroyed in 2002. And I can't even count the number of checkpoints I had to ride or drive through during my years in Palestine. Every checkpoint and every settlement crossing was a possible death sentence. After 20 years of occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, a grassroots movement of Palestinians in the occupied territories erupted, and Palestinians around the country rose up and organized resistance and acts of civil disobedience, only to be met again with a brutal policy of breaking the bones, deportations, imprisonment, and total closure of health and education systems for the Palestinians. The world was finally able to see in real time the brutality of the Israeli occupation, and the Intifada made it possible for the Oslo Accords to happen and maybe try to create peace in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter Horn and then Archer Rose.
Good evening. I am Walter Horn, and I am speaking in support of the ceasefire resolution. The Oslo Accords of 1993 were supposed to provide a roadmap to peace and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. Right-wing Zionists and Israel politicians, however, had no intention of carrying out the agreement. Yitzhak Rabin, the Israel prime minister who signed the Oslo Accords, was assassinated by a far-right Zionist militant. Subsequent Israel governments, led by right-wing politicians such as current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and war criminal Ariel Sharon, have done everything in their power to continue expanding the occupation and sabotage the implementation of Oslo Accords. The broken promises of Oslo could only result in an eruption by people who have been under occupation for more than 30 years by that point. In response, Palestinian towns and cities were invaded, checkpoints and illegal outposts were placed throughout the territories. More settlements were constructed, and a massive apartheid wall was built on mostly Palestinian land.
Archer Rose and then Claire Clark.
My name is Archer Rose, and I am speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. The brutal Israeli reaction to the Second Intifada ultimately led, in 2007, to Gaza being placed in a state of total siege, which continues to this day. Nothing and no one enters or leaves Gaza without Israeli permission. Israel conducted brutal military collective punishments of Gaza's people in 2008, 2012, 2014, and 2018. The genocide we are witnessing right now is just another in a long line of operations that Israeli leaders call mowing the lawn. Nonviolent protest by Palestinians has been met with the same savage violence as armed resistance. In 2018 and 2019, Palestinians staged an ongoing series of peaceful protests called the Great March of Return. Israel responded by shooting thousands of Palestinians, killing 266. Journalists in particular were targeted and assassinated. When the Israeli government spokesperson, Michal Mayan, was asked why the Israeli forces were shooting protesters dead, she answered that we can't put all these people in jail.
Claire Clark and then Mayetzi Ortiz, sorry.
My name is Claire, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. It is important that we understand that Israel has never acted alone as the oppressor of the Palestinian people. Israel is and always has been a proxy of Western powers and an outpost for the defense of Western interests. Without the support of its patrons, Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people would not be possible. Zionist colonization in Palestine was enabled by Britain. Britain trained, organized, and equipped the Zionist militias that became the core of the IDF to act as its enforcers. In 1956, less than 10 years after its founding, Israel joined in a scheme by Britain and France to seize control of the Suez Canal zone from Egypt. For the last 60-plus years, the United States has assumed the role of Israel's imperial patron and guarantor. Hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money has been funneled to Israel in the form of military aid. The United States has served as the indispensable arsenal of Israeli occupation and Israel's political protector in the international arena. Without U.S. support, Israel could not even maintain the occupation, much less embark on new rounds of displacement, slaughter, and attempted destruction of the Palestinian people. In return, Israel has acted as the faithful armed watchdog of American interests in the Middle East. as then Senator Joe Biden put it in 1986, were there not an Israel, the United States would have to invent an Israel to protect her interests in the region. This is why it is so vitally important that as Americans we stand up and speak out to say, not in our name, not with our tax dollars. The buck doesn't stop in Tel Aviv, it stops on the desk of the president in Washington, D.C. So it is our moral duty, your moral duty, to put pressure on our government to do what only it can do, put an end to Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people.
Thank you. And Maetzi Ortiz, and then Rebecca Krug.
I am Mahetzi Ortiz, and I am speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. When Asheville was settled in 1785, it displaced thousands of Cherokee natives. Dragon Canoe, a chief Cherokee, stated, "We never thought the white man would come across the mountain, but he has, and has settled on Cherokee land. He will not leave us but a small spot to stand on." This narrative of a small spot to stand on remains true with other communities in Asheville today, specifically the Black community, who have been systemically displaced, such as through the East Riverside Project, which at the time was the largest urban renewal project of the entire Southeast U.S. The Housing Act of 1949 allowed for such projects to commence, as cities were tasked in identifying areas of blight in the city and creating a revitalization plan. But the responsibility of determining the areas of blight fell upon who? Wealthy white men. With no surprise, these men almost exclusively identified Black neighborhoods as areas of blight, which allowed Asheville to employ eminent domain to acquire land, destroy homes, and rebuild a new community that excluded the previous homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Krug, and then Robert Robinson.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rebecca, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. I'm a Jew living in Asheville. I'm extremely proud of my Jewishness and utterly ashamed of the government of Israel and the U.S. government's support of it. In 1966, Asheville Redevelopment Council proposed the East Riverside Project for the demolition of 698 structures and rehabilitation of 587 buildings. The South Side neighborhood included the East Riverside Project, was home to 50% of Asheville's Black community, from which thousands were displaced, homes were destroyed, and businesses forced to close. Today, the South Side neighborhood is more commonly known as the River Arts District and is a popular Asheville tourist destination to enjoy coffee, art, and shopping. From an outsider perspective, the River Arts District might appear as a hip new addition to Asheville's tourism economy, but it is really a product of racist policies and urban renewal. This is a town that advertises itself as progressive and, according to its government website, quote, an inclusive, diverse community. And yet, despite its original settlement on Cherokee land and many decades of intentional displacement of its Black community, the local government has nothing to say regarding the active settlement, displacement, and genocide of the indigenous people of Palestine that is being funded by our tax dollars. To be clear, Asheville has taken public stances on international affairs before, especially those that impact the global community.
After Robert Robinson is Sadie Bowen.
Good evening, I'm Robert Robinson, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. On Tuesday, March 8th, 2022, during a regular meeting, Mayor Mannheimer took a moment to condemn human rights abuses that have happened and are happening around the world. This was in reference to the war in Ukraine. That is something that we have not seen regarding the now 4-month ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The overwhelming majority of those martyred are innocent civilians, nearly half of whom are children. Mayor Mannheimer also asked for a moment of silence for those who are experiencing violence and aggression in Ukraine and around the world. Where is the public support for Palestinians enduring a genocide? Additionally, under Mayor Mannheimer, Asheville chose to oppose the federal U.S. government in recent years by joining the many cities across the country and encouraging the United States to sign on to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, a legally binding international agreement to comprehensively prohibit nuclear weapons with the ultimate goal being their total elimination. Now, too, is another situation of global importance, considering Israel's blatant disregard for international law and the ICJ ruling declaring their actions these past few months to be genocidal. Despite the ICJ's ruling, our federal government is not acting with human rights and the protection of humanity in mind. If it was necessary for Asheville to speak out in the name of humanity in the context of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, then it surely is also necessary in the context of a genocide in which 12,300 children, likely more and definitely more, have been murdered over the span of a few months by a nation openly disregarding international law and wholly funded by the United States. Where is the public support against these human rights violations? Is it not your obligation to help uphold international law? Thank you.
Thank you. Sadie Bowen and then Talis Montero.
I am Sadie Bowen, and I am speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. 5 years ago, in February 2018, Mayor Esther Mannheimer joined more than 200 mayors from across the United States to express her support for the Clean Power Plan, an essential public health protection and climate change solution that set the first ever federal limits on carbon pollution. It aimed to reduce CO2 emissions from electrical power generation by 32% by 2030 relative to 2005 levels. On January 22nd of this year, carbon accounting expert Leonard de Klerk published the following statistics. 121,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions resulted from the Israeli F-16 and F-35 flights, while 133,650 tons were attributable to the U.S. supply planes since October 7th. On December 5th, 2023, the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners voted unanimously for 764 acres owned by Biltmore Farms adjacent to the Pratt & Whitney plant to be rezoned from residential and commercial service zones to employment zoning. These undeveloped parcels are slated to become a satellite campus for AV Tech to provide, quote, specialized manufacturing instruction in support of Pratt & Whitney, as well as potential future spin-off industry workforce, end quote. Pratt & Whitney is the company here in Asheville who manufactures the F-100 and F-135 engines that are used in those aforementioned F-16 and F-35 aircrafts. Asheville is playing an active, enthusiastic role in the war manufacturing machine under the guise of city advancement and betterment.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we're going for an hour, which will put us at 7:35. And so after Talis Montero is Cassandra Date.
My name is Talis Montero, and I am speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. During the first 2 months of this genocide, Israel dropped over 10,000 bombs on Gaza, resulting in 6,689 metric tons of CO2 emissions.
Maggie, she has put something on the projectors. Sorry, keep going.
We are now at month 5, and there has been over 281,000 metric tons of CO2 released into our atmosphere through Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestine. For comparison, the average carbon footprint per person in Palestine is 0.08 metric tons, and there have been 281,000 metric tons of CO2 released. Groups like Human Rights Watch are now reporting that due to Israel's use of white phosphorus munitions, Gazans should expect to see acid rainfall as they move through their rainy season. In 2016, Mayor Mannheimer signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement. The Paris Climate Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change that was put into action in November 2016. Its overarching goal is to pursue efforts to limit the average global temperature increase to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts that the southern and eastern Mediterranean will warm at a higher rate than the global average over the 21st century, between 3.96 and 9.18 degrees Fahrenheit, which will lead to highly disruptive, if not catastrophic, changes to the region's climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassandra Dayton and then Yasmin Dajani.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Dayton. I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. On January 28, 2020, Mayor Mannheimer read, approved, and adopted Resolution 2025. This is a resolution endorsing the declaration of a climate emergency and emergency mobilization effort to restore a safe climate. In Clause 8 of Resolution 2025, we can read the following. Whereas, restoring a safe and stable climate requires an emergency climate mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II in order to 1, reach zero greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors of the economy, 2, rapidly and safely withdraw down and remove all excess carbon from the atmosphere until safe pre-industrial climate conditions are restored, and 3, implement measure to protect all people and species from the consequences of an abrupt climate breakdown. Allow me to repeat, protect all people and species from the consequences of an abrupt climate breakdown. Asheville's presence within these 3 climate resolutions is nothing short of blatant hypocrisy and virtue signaling. Us Americans are not only killing Palestinians with our tax dollars, but we are killing the planet and inherently ourselves. If you somehow still cannot access enough empathy within yourselves to oppose the murder of children who are not in your city, you need to think of the ones who are. Children born today will face disproportionate increases in floods, earthquakes, droughts, wildfires, crop failures due to climate change, and nature does not discriminate between Americans and Arabs. All children, ours included, my future ones and yours, will reap the consequences of your complicity. Thank you.
Yasmin Dejani and then Lindsay Hartman.
I'm Yasmin, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. On December 29, 2023, South Africa submitted a case before the ICJ to institute measures to prevent the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza by Israel. In bringing this case before the court, they cited the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, a charter to which South Africa, Israel, and the United States are all adherents. It is significant that South Africa has brought this case to court because not too long ago, South Africa was ruled by an apartheid regime, which was at the time supported by the United States and was eventually overthrown only as a result of pressure from the international community. When South Africa presented this case to the ICJ, over 21,000 Palestinians had been killed, with nearly 8,000 presumed to be dead under the rubble. For comparison, as of now, 28,340 Palestinians have been murdered since the beginning of Israel's military attack on Gaza. Within just the first 3 weeks of the Israeli assault on Gaza, 3,195 children were killed, which is more than the number of children killed every year across all the world's conflict zones. Today, that number has risen to over 12,000 children killed. Of those in Gaza who had not been killed, about 85% were forced from their homes, the majority of which have been destroyed. Over 55,000 Palestinians had been wounded with permanent injuries, including limb amputations. There are currently 67,984 wounded civilians due to Israel's assault. There are no functional hospitals left in northern Gaza and only a few partially functioning hospitals in southern Gaza. Wounded civilians are without access to life-saving medical care. According to the World Food Program, 93% of Gaza's population is facing starvation. The World Health Organization stated that disease outbreaks in Gaza may eventually kill thousands of more Palestinians. Combine this with cutting off water to the people in Gaza, these conditions cannot sustain human life.
Thank you. Lindsay Hartman and then Willows Green.
I am cutting my comment due to time constraints.
Thank you. Willows Green and then Ellie Leidner, sorry.
Ellie's also no longer speaking.
Hi, I am Wilos, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. Let me tell you about one individual's story. I would like to first emphasize that there is a paradox here. Every one individual Palestinian story must carry to you as much weight as you value in any one human life. But every Palestinian story has also put aside millions of other stories to form the bigger picture of destruction in Gaza and West Bank and all occupied land and even on American land. This is Donia Abu Muhsin. She survived displacement in this ongoing massacre and survived an Israeli airstrike attack. The attack left her with one leg amputated and killed her mother, her father, and her siblings. In a split second, this child lost everything. She is quoted in the hospital in an interview video saying, quote, "The second the missile hit our house, the whole place was full of chaos. We were all injured. Dust and bricks were all over the place. My mother and father lost their lives together with my sister and my younger brother. My other brother and sister and myself escaped death. Now my life is changing. We are alone now without them. I was connected to this life because I was very much connected to my mother, father, and siblings who died. But I must continue despite the fact that I will never forget them. While sitting in the hospital with a newly amputated leg and her family gone, Doña still kept her dreams living inside of her. She is also quoted saying in the same interview, quote, "I will not give up on my dreams. I hope to be a doctor to help people." On December 17th, Israeli forces shelled the maternity ward of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where Doña was undergoing treatment. Doña Abu Muhsin was killed.
The next person signed up to speak, it says Rivka Moskowitz, but it might be Rivka Moskowitz. Thank you. And then Lindsay Davis.
Hello, my name is Rivka Moskowitz. I'm a Hispanic Jewish member of the community. The lesson we learned from the Holocaust is never again for anyone. Jewish safety will always be intertwined with the safety of Palestinians. You cannot bomb your way to peace. 50,000 killed and more injured, 1.5 million starving with no working hospitals. These are not Jewish values. Palestinians are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites, meaning their bloodline traces to the origins of Judaism. I am an Ashkenazi Jew, meaning my bloodline traces to the Holocaust. We live and breathe the effects of the Holocaust every day, and we understand all too well the irreparable damage that has been done to the Palestinians. Palestinians have faced nonstop genocide and displacement for 5 months, and all of us are complacent with our silence and tax dollars. I am horrified as we witness the Palestinians that have been killed in the name of Jewish safety. We stand up against these false narratives of Zionism. In Genesis, Judaism teaches that every human being is created in the image of God, imbuing each person with inherent dignity and worth. As such, individuals are expected to treat others with respect. Zionism does not teach this. Jews true to the Torah stand in solidarity with Palestinians. While Judaism is 3,000 years old, Zionism is 150 years old, meaning it can never represent true Judaism. In sharing our stories with one another, we see the way Zionism has also harmed Jewish people. Israel has been built off of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in the same way that America is built off of the slave trade and genocide of indigenous people. Jewish people have had long histories in the Middle East, living and sharing community, language, and customs with Muslims and Christians for thousands of years. Here in Asheville, I've experienced nothing but community from Muslims, Christians, and secular individuals from all different backgrounds. By creating a racist hierarchy with European Jews at the top, Zionism erased these histories and destroyed these communities and relationships. Palestinians and Jewish people of color have long been subjected to systemic discrimination and violence by the Israeli government. Every day for 5 months, we have been heartbroken as we watch live-stream genocide. We all ache for Gaza. Ceasefire now.
Safa Alam is who signed up next. Is that person still speaking? Okay. And then Adeluna Malki.
Hello, I'm Safa Alam. I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire resolution. Of the $3.8 billion in annual funding going to Israel, without even mentioning the additional funds that have enabled them to continue a nonstop bombardment on the Gaza Strip in the last 4 months, over $1.4 million from Asheville, North Carolina. That is $1,424,415 of your constituents' tax dollars, of your personal dollars, of my personal dollars, conned to kill Palestinian children and civilians rather than grow ours. With that money, Asheville could have funded 169 households with public housing for a year, 495 children receiving free or low-cost health care, 15 elementary school teachers, 4,055 households with solar electricity produced for a year, 37 students with their loan debt canceled. So when you tell us this isn't a local issue, tell us what it is then. What is it then? City Council, you cannot seriously be considering a statement that tells us to go to Congress? The Congress that is trying to approve an additional $17 billion of emergency aid to add to the $14 billion.
I'm sorry, I'll stop your time. Our audio guy said, please don't scream.
Oh, okay. Totally understand that. All right, I needed to come down anyways. Let me go find my spot then again. The Congress that is trying to approve an additional $17 billion of emergency aid to add to the $14 billion of emergency aid to add to the $318 billion of aid since World War II. Aid to what? Aid to fully fund unconditionally the death of 30,000 bodies? As humans, as you, do you not find it especially your responsibility to be our local voice to Congress when they are obviously when they're obviously deeply ignoring us? Are we going to be ignored at every level of representation? Are we going to be ignored by the representation that we have the most direct access to? Thank you. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Andaluna Malky, and then Gabriel Nassar McMillan.
My name is Andaluna Malky, and I'm speaking in support of the presented ceasefire. Though whether or not human suffering, especially the suffering of children, is located within our borders or not, really shouldn't be any consequence to a human with a working heart and conscience. It seems that our government at every level needs to be reminded that this genocide is not simply an international conflict entirely isolated from us. As with all things that happen on this ever-globalizing planet, intrinsic connections are everywhere. There are 14 million Palestinians in the world, of whom a little over 5 million live in the state of Palestine, leaving almost 9 million Palestinians scattered throughout the global diaspora. In the United States, estimates of people with familial ties to Palestine range from 170,000 people to a little over 300,000 people. That is directly due to the expulsion of Palestinians from their homes and homeland for the last 75 years, and to the ongoing occupation of our homeland, our grandparents' homeland, their grandparents' homeland, to which we are not permitted to return. Historic Palestine is not a huge country. It is roughly 1/5 the size of North Carolina, and yet Palestinians are scattered throughout the entire world. We are everywhere. I am everywhere. You have Palestinians in your constituency here in Asheville. I go to Warren Wilson College. It is hard to get accurate census information on the Arab population in this country due to the erasure of our identity in the census, and any legal paperwork that one might need to fill out in this country. All people who are from or descended from the North African and Middle Eastern regions of the world are required to identify as white. You cannot accurately know how much of your constituency is Arab, but we are here, and we are asking for acknowledgement from our representatives, such a bare minimum of acknowledgement. Simply the endorsement of a ceasefire in the context of one of the world's most rapid and destructive genocides.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
For the next two people, we're just going to speak together in 2 minutes.
So 2 minutes each, or two minutes total? Okay, thank you.
7:35.
Yeah, and your NER?
I'm Nor.
Yeah.
Gabriel. Right. Before Gabriel starts, I need the projector up for this. And what I have to say is that the thing that I'm going to be rolling through while Gabriel is talking, Al Jazeera just released 11,500 names of dead children. This is about 5,000. Yeah, this is about 5,000 of those.
In recent months, the U.S. has seen a rise in hate crimes towards Palestinian Americans and all Arab communities, a reality that is by no means new, but has been flaring up dangerously in recent months. In a country where the racist stereotypical image of the Arab terrorist has been completely normalized and indoctrinated into the public psyche through the education system, news outlets, film and video game industries, political speeches, and countless other facets of American society, Arabs are not made to feel safe in this country. And I want to mention, we just got to 4-year-olds out of all of these names. The historical and cumulative trauma of immigrants and their children and families is further amplified through this harmful stereotyping. In relation to the current crisis, it is being used to justify the Israeli regime of apartheid and genocide, as it has been doing for decades. We have seen news outlets immediately report unverified claims from Israeli officials that later turned out to be false. And when Palestinians are murdered, we have witnessed the intentionally vague phrasing of Palestinians have died. Recently, networks as large as CNN have faced backlash from their own staff over editorial policies they say have led to a regurgitation of Israeli propaganda and the censoring of Palestinian voices. This intentional bias in reporting is quite directly costing Palestinians their lives, both in the state of Palestine and here in the U.S. Just last week, a Palestinian American father was stabbed by a complete stranger. A little before that, we saw a landlord attack a Palestinian mother and 6-year-old son, fatally stabbing him 26 times. And after that, we saw 3 Palestinian American college students get shot by a neighbor. It is not enough to prosecute these sick individuals after the damage is done when the entire system itself maintains the systemic dehumanization of Arabs as people. So we are demanding the endorsement of a ceasefire resolution, which we realize is merely symbolic, but it would be a meaningful acknowledgement of Arabs and the safety that they deserve in a country that has long maintained aggressively dehumanizing propaganda against them as an entire people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. This concludes our public comment period, and I want to thank you all again for meaningfully participating in it and being respectful of one another. We greatly appreciate it. Council, we have a closed, you can't purge council, sorry. Thank you. Council, we have a closed session, and Maggie, you have a closed session motion.
I can put it. You want me to go ahead now, or you want to
go
let
ahead.
them clear? Okay. I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons. 1, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318. .11A1. The laws that make the information privileged and confidential are North Carolina General Statute 143-318.10E, and 2, to consult with the attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to the handling of the following matter: City of Asheville versus VJ's Auto Inc. and Schlossman Family Limited Partnership, court file number 16-CVS-2491. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will adjourn from the closed session. Thank you.